Oral questions. Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've all had a couple of weeks for reflection on the political change to the entry point for early immersion. I anticipate the Premier, not unlike myself, is getting calls, letters, emails, mostly recently from the Retired Teachers Association, all expressing concern this change is being done at the wrong time and for the wrong reasons. All of the available data would direct us to conclude that making this change is simply a bad idea. At this time, it needs to be done differently. We need to understand what the results are of the current program before moving forward. The most recent results of the Grade 1 entry point indicate a success rate of only 10%. Does the Premier agree that the data of the past Grade 1 entry would certainly indicate that it is not the solution for the future? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'm certainly disappointed to hear what I'm hearing from the opposition today. We've debated this, I think this is probably the 10th day in the legislature, Mr. Speaker, pretty extensively. And we've made it very clear that we've been talking about restoring French immersion to Grade 1 for years in this province. In 2012, when the Leader of the Opposition was the Minister of Finance, his government asked a bipartisan, independent group of individuals to look at French immersion, and they came out with the recommendation of restoring it to Grade 1. I am very surprised and disappointed to hear the opposition continuously try to give the impression to New Brunswickers and to the people in this legislature that the decision was made for any other reason than the fact that this nonpartisan, independent commission came out and said that French immersion should be restored to Grade 1. And Mr. Speaker, we promised to do that during the campaign in 2014, and we are doing it here now in this province.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, evidence-based decision-making was a commitment by the Premier. The evidence tells us that in 2002, 1,783 students started Grade 1 immersion. By 2013, their Grade 12 year, 823 presented for the proficiency test. The evidence tells us that over half either dropped out or didn't care to take the test. Of those who took the test, only 30%, or 231 students, met the expected standards. So in summary, 1,783 started the program, 251 finished the program and met the acceptable standard. Based on these numbers, 1,751 started, only 251 finished. Would your Premier describe the Grade 1 entry point for early French immersion as a success for this group of New Brunswick? We can do so much better. All of our children should be coming out fully bilingual. We just can't keep repeating the past. Let's change the dial. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I don't understand why the Leader of the Opposition continuously pretends that there's not a report that exists. A report that was done by two former education ministers, one of a Liberal government and one of a Conservative government. A report that was done by meeting New Brunswickers, teachers, students, teacher assistants and others, educators, and of course, experts. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't understand how the Leader of the Opposition glosses over the past and pretends this report doesn't exist. It was commissioned by his government, by this independent, nonpartisan process that was very stakeholder engaged, came out and said that restore French immersion to Grade 1 was the right thing to do. Now, Mr. Speaker, there were challenges with the way that it was done in the province before. We know that. We recognize that. The report recognized that. And that's why we will do everything we can to mitigate those challenges, overcome those challenges, make sure we have the best education system for our children possible.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Speaker, the Premier's very own co-chair of the 10-year plan, Karen Power, said she was against changes in implementing more confusion in the classrooms of our province. Let's take this examination step a little further. In 2013, the year we are considering, there were 6,449 students in the Grade 12 class. 4,666 of them did not start Grade 1 immersion. Another 382 started Grade 1 immersion but dropped out by Grade 5. A further 960 dropped out by Grade 12. And another 572 didn't meet the standard. So out of 6,449 graduates, we produced 251 bilingual graduates. That is 3.9%. The Premier and his government have not chosen to provide any proof that this politically motivated return to Grade 1 immersion will give us any better results than what we have witnessed in the past. Perhaps the Premier's been waiting for just the right moment to explain why this change of grade 1 will give us better results. Can the Premier offer any proof that this will be the case?
The Honourable Premier.
The report, Mr. Speaker, the report that was commissioned by his government when he was the Minister of Finance, that was done in an independent fashion, that was done in a nonpartisan way, that listened to New Brunswickers, teachers, educators, and experts, recommended that French immersion be restored to grade 1. That was in 2012, Mr. Speaker. So when we went into a campaign in 2014, we made the promise that we would follow the recommendation of the nonpartisan independent commission, and that we would do so in a way that we mitigated and overcame challenges that the system was facing before. And of course, Mr. Speaker, we were going to do everything we can to make sure that this new iteration of French immersion in grade 1 will work for the people in New Brunswick. And we're going to do that by investing more and investing strategically in our education system, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Today, the Program for International Student Assessment has released their triennial report. Early reports show that Canada ranks within the top 10 in all 3 of the subjects covered, namely reading, math, and science. When the results are later broken down provincially, we will learn how New Brunswick students are faring compared with the rest of Canada and the world. The most recent assessment results from our own provincial education department do not give us much cause for optimism. 4 out of 5 grade 6 students are not getting their math and science, and almost half are struggling with reading. Again, today, I will extend the hand of cooperation to ask the Premier for us to work together to focus on the 10-year plan that his team is developing. A 10-year plan built by the teachers, bring stability to our system, and let this stability last beyond the election cycle. Premier, let's make it happen. Thank you.
Honourable Premier.
Monsieur le Président, le plan de 10 ans ou les plans de 10 ans pour nos systèmes d'éducation a été développé. Alors, c'est malheureux que le chef de l'opposition, lorsqu'il était dans le caucus conservateur, n'a pas été invité ou il n'a pas levé sa main pour faire partie du groupe qui nous donnait des conseils sur les plans d'éducation de 10 ans. Mais, Monsieur le Président, ça a été développé. Alors, nous avons travaillé avec les enseignants, les éducateurs, les éducatrices, les experts, les néo-brunswickoises et les néo-brunswickois pour développer 2 plans d'éducation pour nos 2 systèmes qui vont nous aider à avoir les résultats que nous avons besoin et que nous voulons, Monsieur le Président. Alors, le bateau a déjà décollé, Monsieur le Président. Les plans ont été développés. Ça fait probablement 5 à 6 fois que je répète ça au chef de l'opposition. J'espère qu'il comprend maintenant. Mais, Monsieur le Président, qu'est-ce que nous avons besoin de faire maintenant? C'est d'investir davantage en éducation, pas suivre les pas du chef de l'opposition lorsqu'il était le ministre des Finances, et il a coupé en éducation, Monsieur le Président.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the problem is this change being proposed for the early entry point to grade 1 is not part of the Premier's own 10-year plan. It is not condoned by one of the co-chairs of that plan. That is the issue. He's got 2 plans that are very much conflicting. The public interest as a result of the dismal assessment results, the Premier has a unique opportunity to engage New Brunswickers and start on a path to fixing our education system once and for all, doing things differently. The assessments, even if we can't be certain what they will mean, certainly support the idea that something isn't working. I think we can agree on that point. I hope we can also agree that the experts with the knowledge and experience to put us on the right path are the classroom teachers. I am certain we can also agree that teachers are reluctant to speak openly and frankly for fear of their careers. It's a sensitive issue, but it's our children's future. Can we agree that we need to hear from the teachers with no conditions or restraints attached? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, maybe we have to go back in history a little bit to find out why we are where we are right now, Mr. Speaker, with the challenges and opportunities that we face as a province. When the Leader of the Opposition was Minister of Finance, his government had no plan for education, Mr. Speaker. So we made a commitment that we would develop 10-year education plans with teachers and educators, listening to experts, Mr. Speaker, and that's exactly what we did. The plan is developed. It is strong, and it is going to give us the pathway we need to have the best education system possible here in New Brunswick. But, Mr. Speaker, I think we also have to point out another interesting fact of our history here in the province. We have teachers speaking out. We have the president of the NBTA saying that a lot of the challenges we face in the system now are because of the cuts that the then Minister of Finance, who is now the Leader of the Opposition, made to education. He said in this legislature, the education systems don't need more money, Mr. Speaker. Well, we don't agree. We're going to invest more. In fact, we'll be the government that invests the most in the history of our province in education.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the MBTA said the challenges in the classroom are far greater than they ever were. The last thing teachers have a real opportunity to do is teach. That's what the President of the MBTA said. He said we need to stop meddling in the classroom, just as the Premier is proposing to do with this change in entry point without having results to do it. He said that they need to have a chance for stability in the system, and that's what we're proposing. The Premier is proposing a 10-year plan. A 10-year plan that can build stability. A 10-year plan that does not include this political change that's being proposed. Let's get on your 10-year plan. Let's get on a cycle of improvement, stability, and let's work together to do that. I'll sign off on it. You get classroom teachers involved in the solution for the 10 years, and I'll sign off on it in the next year, the next 6 months. So we don't meddle with it. We fix it once and for all. Let's take this opportunity to make a real difference, a real political change, and let's build a future for our kids.
The Honourable Premier.
Monsieur le Président, peut-être le chef de l'opposition était trop occupé à mener sa campagne pour la chefferie de son parti. Parce que, clairement, il ne comprend pas le processus qu'on a passé à travers. Monsieur le Président, nous avons ajouté des personnes de son équipe, de son caucus, qui ont venu sur un conseil avisoire, Monsieur le Président, pour nous donner des idées, des avis et leurs suggestions sur comment améliorer notre système d'éducation. And Mr. Speaker, in this non-partisan approach, where we listen to experts, teachers, stakeholders, educators, and New Brunswickers, we developed our 10-year education plans. They're developed, they're done, and they were done exactly in the way that the Leader of the Opposition says they should have been done. So this should be a positive thing, Mr. Speaker. Now, where we find ourselves is the Leader of the Opposition drawing a line in the sand. He thinks that the system doesn't need more money. We want to invest more in education. In fact, we want to be the government to invest the most in education in the history of New Brunswick, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, unlike ever before, we're taxing the working class of this province. We're asking them to pay more and more and more for less. I'm asking for strategic investment in areas that work. We're having teachers say no to this instability in the classroom by a sudden curriculum change. We're seeing the deck chair say no, we don't want this to move forward at this time. We're seeing the Retired Teachers Association say no, we don't want this. The school districts are saying no. How many more people do we need to say no to listen and say, you know, maybe they've got a point. Maybe just throwing money at it's not the solution after all. Maybe if we listen to the classroom teachers, they'll actually find a way to fix this, because we haven't been successful. History will show 9th place is not our target. Number 1 is our target, and we should be working to get there. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Premier.
Not sure there was a question, Mr. Speaker, but I can tell you one thing. There is a clear, stark difference between our government and that of which the Leader of the Opposition would like to lead, Mr. Speaker. He would like us to cut into education. He would like us to cut in health care. He would like us to cut our investments in infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, we want to invest more in those things. He is again saying today, like he did just a few weeks ago, that the education system doesn't need more money, Mr. Speaker. He's saying today that when we invest in education, it's throwing money around. Well, Mr. Speaker, we beg to differ. Investing in education is the best investment we can possibly make for our economy. It is the best social equalizer and the best way to ensure we have a strong social fabric. We are going to continue on this side of the legislature, Mr. Speaker, to invest more in education, to invest strategically in education, and I can guarantee you, Mr. Speaker, we will be the government that invests most in the education system in the history of our province.
Member for Hampton.
Mr. Speaker, I've been contacted by many parents who are unable to get answers to their questions about the political change to the early French immersion program, entry point. I've been trying to get answers on their behalf in the next few days. One question that comes up time and time again is how many students are actually participating in the French immersion program. I'm sure the Minister has basic figures on enrollment and participation at his fingertips, so I'll ask him to share these questions with us. These figures. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister of Education inform the House what percentage of grade 3 students opted to take early French immersion in grade 3 in September 2016?
The Honourable Premier.
Oh, it's disappointing, Mr. Speaker. I thought the member opposite, the critic for education, would have a much more conciliatory tone. I thought when he got elected it would be somebody that would be really trying to have a good discussion with the opposition and with other parties. Mr. Speaker, for them to continuously call this a political decision is unfortunate and disappointing. Not one of them yet has acknowledged that there was a nonpartisan, independent report that was sanctioned by the previous government when the Leader of the Opposition was the Minister of Finance, asking what should be done about French immersion. This nonpartisan, independent, stakeholder-engaged process came out with the recommendation of grade 1. Now, will the critic of education for the opposition, will he at least acknowledge that there was a report in 2012 that was nonpartisan, independent, that recommended that we restore French immersion to grade 1, or is he going to continue to use the tagline that everybody in this legislature and everybody watching knows that they're trying to use for political purposes?
Member for Hampton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, no answers for us. Parents of kindergarten-aged children are very concerned about hearing about the District Education Council's retired teachers and MBTA who agree on this. It's a bad move. I attended meetings myself last week. No answers for the parents are there regarding the entry point in grade 1. We're trying to find measurement for the grade 3 entry point as well, and we can't seem to find any. Can the Minister advise the House what percentage of the grade 3 students opted to take the French immersion in September of 2016, and also the numbers of students that elected to go into grade 1 early French immersion in September 2007?
The Honourable the Premier.
Monsieur le Président, encore une fois, l'opposition ne veut pas reconnaître qu'il y avait un rapport qui a été fait de façon indépendante, de façon non partisane, qui a fait une étude exhaustive, qui a écouté les gens du Nouveau-Brunswick, qui a écouté des experts, des étudiants, des élèves, des enseignants et enseignantes, des éducateurs et éducatrices, et ils ont venu avec une recommandation de voir l'immersion précoce en français dès la première année. And Mr. Speaker, I can see why the member opposite doesn't want to mention the report. It's because he agrees with it. He said in this legislature that earlier is better when it comes to French immersion. Quote, end quote, Mr. Speaker. He said it himself. He agrees with the report. So will he at least get up today and do not what his Leader of the Opposition is doing, but at least admit that this report exists, that this report was independent, that this report was nonpartisan, and that this report recommended restoring grade 1 French immersion, and they did this recommendation 4 years ago, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Hampton.
Mr. Speaker, we do have the numbers. Let's consider the evidence. In September 2015, 42% of students opted to take early French immersion. In September 2007, the last year the entry point in grade 1 was offered, 31% of the students opted to take early French immersion. So it seems to me about 30% more opted to take the early immersion program at the grade 3 entry point as opposed to grade 1. Will the Minister commit to this House today that those gains in participation will remain after the change in September 2017?
The Honourable the Premier.
I have to get up, Mr. Speaker, and point out they're still not acknowledging this report exists. Mr. Speaker, this report was commissioned by their government, by a Conservative government in 2012, in which the Leader of the Opposition was the Minister of Finance. So, Mr. Speaker, he knows it exists. He was there when it was commissioned. And why they will not mention word of this report now is very frustrating, disappointing, and surprising. Mr. Speaker, the member opposite said himself that earlier is better when it comes to French immersion. Now, there's one thing we can agree on. We have to improve the way it was done before. We agree with that, Mr. Speaker. So we are going to restore it to grade 1, as the report recommended we do in 2012, as we promised we would do during the campaign in our platform in 2014. And, Mr. Speaker, we're going to do so in a way that we mitigate the challenges that the system faced before. And how we're going to do that? Well, unlike the Leader of the Opposition would do, we're not going to cut in education. We're going to invest more in education.
Member for Southwest Miramichi Bay de Bend.
Mr. Speaker, the 50-year monopoly that this government is attempting to give Enbridge is clearly not in the best interest of our province. It will continue to ask meaningful questions about the Enbridge deal, and I'm hopeful the Minister will be willing to provide factual, meaningful answers. Can the Minister advise this House What happens in 2018 and 19 if the price of gas increases? This deal is fixing distribution rates at a 3% increase. Under market-based rates, if the price of gas increased, distribution rates would fall. Does this bill mean users of natural gas are open to large bill increases if gas prices increase?
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much for the question. But, you know, Mr. Speaker, something I find rather ironic and interesting. The member opposite mentions about, will the minister answer some questions about this? And I'd be very happy to. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, the committee last day was on the 25th of November, 21 days after the bill was announced, after the deal was announced, Mr. Speaker. Not one substantive question came from the opposition. We spent 4 days in committee, Mr. Speaker. I had staff on hand for all 4 days. We were up for about 3.5 hours in total during the 3 hours, and all it was, Mr. Speaker, was a rant and a rave about this poor deal and everything else, Mr. Speaker. There was not one substantive question that was brought forward from the opposition, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you something. right now. $820 million is going to be off the backs of every man, woman, and child in this province. And that's what's really important, Mr. Speaker, as we go forward on this deal.
Member for Southwest Miramichi Bay Devin.
Mr. Speaker, all of New Brunswick knows that we can not only not get questions answered in question period, but we can't get them answered in committee either. I'm asking the Minister questions on behalf of 12,000 or so Enbridge customers who face an uncertain future in relation to their future gas costs. A lot of NBers operate on a household budget. A lot of New Brunswickers plan for the future based upon the best financial information available. This deal brings a lot of uncertainty for these gas customers. As we are aware, Enbridge is currently seeking a 30% increase for 2017. This fact seems to get shrouded by all the other harmful aspects of this deal. Can the Minister get on his feet and advise this House whether there will be any adjustment in 2018 and 19 if the current 30% increase Enbridge Gas applied for in 2017 is accepted by the EUB?
The Honourable Minister of Energy and Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, it was under their model of 2017-2018, Mr. Speaker. It was under their legislation, Mr. Speaker. The fact of the matter is, during the questioning, during the rants and raves about the obnoxious comments that were coming from the opposition, Mr. Speaker, the fact is it is the EUB. I have faith in the Energy and Utilities Board, and I'm sure that members opposite have faith in the Energy and Utilities Board. I hope they do, Mr. Speaker, because one of our utilities, NB Power, had asked for a 2% rate increase, Mr. Speaker. They went before the Energy and Utilities Board, and they received a 1.7%. Mr. Speaker, they put their best business case forward. They put their revenue requirements forward. That's exactly what Enbridge is going to be doing. They're going to be putting their requirements for revenue forward before they get anywhere. So, Mr. Speaker, they keep on talking about this deal stinks. Well, the only thing that stinks over in this House, Mr. Speaker, is over there, because they don't understand the real math of this deal here, Mr. Speaker.
Minister. Member for Southwest Miramichi Bay Devin. Member for St. John East.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Do you want to burn your time for question period?
Thank you.
Go ahead. Or have we decided? Member for Southwest Miramichi Bay Devin. Order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, why all the inaccurate rhetoric? The deal was ending in 2019. Why would we need a 50-year monopoly? The business model for this Enbridge, as I understand it, depended upon investment of $300 million and 70,000 customers. We have learned that the investment turned out to be $500 million and attracted only 12,000 customers. We are aware the current Enbridge deal was due to expire in 2019. Given the fact that Enbridge only attracted a fraction of the customers needed for their business model to be any sort of success, did this government at any point consider what would happen in 2019 when the current deal expired? Did you discuss the possible takeover of the system in 2019 by NB Power? Has this concept been discussed inside your or the Premier's office?
Recognize the Minister of Energy and Resource Development.
Mr. Speaker, I really appreciate the questions this morning, or this afternoon. Along the same lines before, Mr. Speaker, the rhetoric, and I think really what they need to do is read the old deal and read the new deal, Mr. Speaker, and maybe get a technical briefing so they understand a little bit more. But the fact of the matter is, they took a contract and ripped it up, completely ripped it up, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, $820 million, what every man, woman, and child was exposed to. That's per capita, Mr. Speaker. That's $1,100 per New Brunswicker, $1,100 per child, $1,100 per senior, $1,100 per each hard-working New Brunswicker, Mr. Speaker. You can't take a contract and rip it up, Mr. Speaker. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, $820 million is removed from the backs of people, the onus on the backs of people, Mr. Speaker. $900 million, the same thing as Coulson Cove, we had to clean up. $1 billion with the cost overrun of LaPro, we had to clean up, Mr. Speaker. Same with the $150 million.
Leader of the Green Party. Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's almost 2017, and the widespread spraying of glyphosate over our forests and under our power lines is still permitted. I know it's incredible. Despite the devastating impacts it has on wildlife, and despite its role in eliminating our beautiful mixed-wood forests in favor of spruce plantations, will the Minister of Environment and Local Government stop issuing permits for the spraying of glyphosate on forest land and NB Power right-of-ways?
Member of Environment and Local Government.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. D'abord, j'aimerais remercier le député d'en face, le député de Fredericton Sud, pour sa question. Et vous savez, avec tout ce qui se dit, avec tout ce qui s'écrit, je respecte, je comprends qu'il puisse y avoir des préoccupations, des craintes en ce qui a trait à la sécurité de ce produit-là. Cependant, comme gouvernement, le gouvernement de Nouveau-Brunswick doit continuer à se fier aux évaluations, aux études qui sont faites par les experts de Santé Canada. Et dans ce contexte-là, Monsieur le Président, donc, on doit prendre des décisions qui sont fondées sur des faits, qui sont fondées sur la science. Donc, l'application d'herbicides, comme vous le savez, est réglementée par le gouvernement fédéral et la province travaille en partenariat avec le fédéral afin d'assurer que l'application d'herbicides est faite de façon sécuritaire et responsable. Donc, tous les produits antiparasitaires qui sont utilisés ici dans la province doivent être homologués par l'Agence de réglementation de la lutte antiparasitaire et en plus, mon ministère donne également des permis.
Leader of the Third Party.
Monsieur le Président, des millions de dollars d'argent public sont utilisés pour empoisonner les arbres à bois franc pour que les grandes compagnies forestières puissent remplacer notre forêt par des plantations forestières après les avoir coupées à blanc. Énergie Nouveau-Brunswick est retombée dans l'arrosage de glyphosate sous ses lignes électriques pour éviter les coûts associés au débroussaillement mécanique. Est-ce que le ministre va utiliser son autorité sous les lois sur le contrôle des pesticides, la loi provinciale, interdire l'utilisation de glyphosate à cette fin?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Local Government.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Vous savez, je mentionnais l'importance des faits de la science et j'ai mentionné également que donc le ministère de l'Environnement et des gouvernements locaux donne des permis, mais seulement lorsqu'il y a eu homologation au fédéral. Et on a entendu des préoccupations, et comme vous le savez, je suis très heureux que la médecin hygiéniste par intérim et le bureau du médecin hygiéniste, donc en chef, avaient pris la décision de rendre public le rapport sur le glyphosate. Et l'objectif principal de ce rapport était de réviser toutes les données, je répète bien, toutes les données disponibles au sujet du glyphosate. Bien qu'il y ait une certaine incertitude à propos de ce produit, eh bien, le médecin hygiéniste en chef par intérim et son bureau ont conclu que le glyphosate ne devait pas être interdit. Et en plus, on déterminé que donc l'exposition au glyphosate au Nouveau-Brunswick est le même ou inférieur à ce qui se trouve ailleurs. Donc, les données que nous avons pour l'instant, Monsieur le Président, font en sorte que nous allons continuer dans la voie que nous avons actuellement.
Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year, myself and the member of Restigouche West tabled collectively over 12,000 signatures collected by Stop Burning New Brunswick, a grassroots organization opposed to the use of glyphosate on Crown lands. Today, I'm going to table close to 14,000 more signatures, making it the largest ever petition ever tabled in the Legislative Assembly. These petitions reflect the views of rural New Brunswickers who have had it with being ignored. They've had it with the way woodlot owners are being treated. They've had it with clear cutting. They've had it with spraying, and they've had it with the decimation of our beautiful mixed forest. This is more signatures than were contained in the petition supporting a moratorium on fracking. The government listened to the people then, Mr. Speaker. Why won't it listen now?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Local Government.
Comme je le disais tout à l'heure, Monsieur le Président, donc, comme gouvernement, on doit se fonder sur la science et sur les faits. Et je le disais, l'hygiéniste en chef donc, de la province a complété un rapport qui indiquait que l'application de glyphosate, donc au niveau recommandé, ne présente aucun risque accru discernable pour la santé humaine. Et j'aimerais également mentionner que ce produit a récemment également fait l'objet d'une réévaluation périodique par Santé Canada et que, selon le projet de décision, les produits contenant du glyphosate ne présente pas de risque inacceptable pour la santé humaine. Et en plus, j'aimerais préciser qu'en mai dernier, un groupe d'experts de l'Organisation mondiale de la santé sur les résidus de pesticides a conclu qu'il était improbable que l'exposition au glyphosate par le biais de l'alimentation pose un risque de cancer pour les humains. Donc, nous devons, comme gouvernement, se fier sur les données, sur la science, et c'est ce que nous faisons, Monsieur le Président. Merci beaucoup.
Time for question period has expired.